So it looks like the Trump administration has officially lost the battle over DACA. Let's talk about it. So for seemingly the first time in a very, very long time, we actually have some very good news to report, which is that the Trump administration has official tissel, as I like to say, they've lost their battle with DACA. And this, of course, is referring to the Dreamers Act, right? So everybody's familiar with that. Before we go ahead and get into the show, of course, I would like to let you know you can always support the show by becoming a Rockfin Premium member. Many of you already are, and of course, we appreciate you. You can also join us on Patreon or Cash App by scanning those QR codes or clicking on that Linktree link in the description below. Now, we got that knocked out. Just recently, which is kind of a surprise for a lot of people, I'm sure. I'll explain why in a second. The federal courts just ruled that DACA is now 100% restored. Now, some people are probably kind of confused as to why this is a big deal. Now, prior to literally maybe 2 weeks ago, DACA was in this weird limbo phase because they were going back and forth in court. So although the Dreamers could not be deported, they couldn't reapply for anything. So they were in a perpetual state of limbo, and especially in my opinion, going into or coming out of, I should say, an election season, a transitional election season like we're about to see. That's not like ever a good place you want to be. But on top of that, Dreamers are potentially new Dreamers couldn't apply, right? If you were in some weird limbo state even prior to that, like I had a friend who was in a weird limbo phase with DACA because of like transitioning into adulthood, and like she just graduated college, like she was in limbo and couldn't do anything about her visa. So prior to this, DACA people were not able to reapply, and new people could not apply since before September of 2017. So it's about 2 years where people were in limbo. So new applications who weren't previously eligible, typically because they were too young back then, can now once again apply. Now, as most of you all know, DACA was created by the Barack Obama administration. And although DACA is a highly celebrated topic, right? It's highly celebrated. It was an executive order by Barack Obama, and it truly did protect hundreds of thousands of undocumented children who had come here very, very young, at a very, very young age. But this is all they know. A lot of them a lot of times only speak English because they've literally been here for that long. Now, here are some misconceptions that need to be cleared up about DACA, Dreamers, etc. I know a lot of people like were on this team scrap DACA. Like, first of all, bro, these kids literally have nothing to do with you. Most of I think at this point, well, they're old enough now, I guess. But like most of the kids in DACA at one point weren't even like old enough to be tax-paying citizens. And yet people were like, oh, we got to get rid of DACA. We got to get rid of DACA. We got to be strong on administration. And that, and by the way, was including Donald Trump. Now, what's interesting about Trump and DACA specifically is that he had been pretending as if he had won a bunch of victories in this department. And I had been telling people frequently, that's not true. He hadn't won yet, right? But on top of that, the Democrats hadn't won. But both sides were pretending that they had won. Remember when the the shutdown happened, and both sides were like, oh, we're approving the budgets now because we got exactly what we wanted. Really, he got more because he definitely got the wall funding. He got a lot more wall funding. But like the Democrats didn't do anything. And I have been telling people even back then, I'm like, the Democrats are going to do anything about this. They could have, did this weird thing. Happens a lot in other countries. I know something that Americans are not really all that familiar with, and I know that immigrants aren't all that familiar with this process or this idea that come to America, and that is maybe create a legitimate path to citizenship. That would be the answer that Democrats could come up with. That could be the legislation that Democrats pushed, but they chose not to. So that means, of course, it was left up to federal courts, and despite Trump having so much influence over the federal court judges currently making these decisions, there is, some positive change that can come about even under Trump judges. In fact, we've seen other positive situations like the North Dakota Access Pipeline situation. So no DAPL, Standing Rock. That pipeline was stricken down, even though Obama's courts under Obama had upheld it. So this is a good thing. Now, another misconception is that somehow because of DACA being a good thing in a vacuum, that Barack Obama is significantly better on immigration than Donald Trump is or was. It's not true. It just simply isn't. Let's just look at this Washington Post article. And Washington Post is basically just a propaganda machine. And yet even they acknowledge that Barack Obama was pretty bad. It was pretty horrible. According to the latest snapshot of ISIS prisoner population, right? And that's from early November, nearly 70% of the inmates had no prior conviction of ISIS detainees, had no prior conviction. So that, by the way, kills that myth from Trump. This whole idea that, we're just arresting everybody because they're a threat. They're sitting over their words. It's not true. Now, that happened to Trump. And though Trump has made cracking down on immigration the centerpiece of his first term, his administration lags far behind Barack Obama when it comes to the pace of deportations. Not just the total amount of. This man is falling behind just in the pace of deportations, or fell behind because he's done. He's about to be out, right? So it said, I'm going to read it again. Though President Trump has made cracking down on immigration the centerpiece of his first term, his administration lags far behind President Obama's pace of deportations. Obama, who immigrant advocates at one point called the deporter-in-chief, at one point, we still do. We still do. Okay, first of all, it ain't just at one point, it's at all points, including now. Anyway, it said that they called him deporter-in-chief because he removed 409,849 people in 2012 alone. Now, if I recall, I'm going to go ahead and verify this before I lie on y'all. This is not a coincidence because DACA was created in 2012. In other words, the year that he deported 409, almost 410,000 people, he created DACA so that you wouldn't pay attention. He's like, look over here, hey. All right. He also, and now Trump obviously vowed to deport millions, but he actually has never surpassed the deportation of 260,000. Now, this is what's interesting to me also. I always say Trump got used and abused on this subject. Use and abuse. He'll never admit it, of course, because he's a hard-headed egotist and he's full of himself. But he definitely got used and abused, and I'm going to tell you why. The reason that ICE has been ramped up, that you have these neocons in the back of Trump's head pushing this agenda, is because of these private detention centers making boatloads of money per day, just like the private prison system perpetuates a corrupt criminal justice system, because they make boatloads of money off of our bodies. It's the same concept. You have to keep the detention centers filled up. So Trump got. They didn't want to deport immigrants. They just wanted to keep them there. Before maybe ultimately deporting them, but mostly it was about keeping them in there as long as possible. The Washington Post article actually details Eastern European gentleman who was in there for over 700 days. Never had a conviction. He wasn't even a flight risk. They know where all his family is. And the reason why, because he's basically been there his entire life. Why? Because they get paid every single day that young man is in there. So Trump thinking he was like, oh yeah, people just want to be safe. Yeah, maybe some people have been fear-mongering into believing that immigrants are the biggest threat to their livelihood and their lives. But no. It's the establishment. Again, it's the corruption. It's the corporate corruption. There is nothing to not be celebrated about DACA getting this victory today. This is an L Trump needed to take on his whole forehead in front of everybody. And it's actually, in my opinion, it's very disappointing that more people have not discussed this. This was such a contentious issue. This is such a hot button issue when it was able to be used against Donald Trump in some negative way and used to pretend as if the Democrats like were their favorites amongst immigrants. But that's now that the election's over, now nobody wants to talk about it. Coincidence? Probably not. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are about this. Like this video, share this video, leave a comment below, but always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.